Hello, everyone. We're going to give people a few more minutes just to get logged on to make sure that we have quorum. Welcome, everyone. If you're just joining, we're going to give people a few more minutes to ensure we have quorum. Okay, good morning or good afternoon, depending on the part of the country that you're in. We still do not yet have quorum, but I would like to get started with a few items that don't need votes. And we'll kind of have to adjust, so we won't be approving the agenda or minutes until we have quorum, which is about another 20 people. So we'll just get started on a few other items. So firstly, welcome everyone to this year's AGM. Thank you for coming. This is your opportunity to be informed about the results of the past year, as well as to continue to shape the future of CAEP. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from Saanich, British Columbia, on the unceded traditional territory of the Wasanich people. We recognize and honor the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people as the original custodians of the lands that we now call Canada. As an organization and a profession, we must continue to strive towards reconciliation. This includes advancing health equity and ensuring that emergency care is accessible, safe, and inclusive for all. As we gather virtually from many places, I invite each of you to reflect on the Indigenous lands where you're situated. If you would like, you're welcome to share your own land acknowledgement, either in the chat or at any point during the meeting before speaking. We'll have to move past the approval of the agenda and approval of the minutes until we have quorum to be able to do votes on those items. So we're going to, hold on one moment, I think we'll have to move to Sunil for some discussion about the financials.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Firstly, I'd like to remind you that the audited financial statements for 2024 were sent in an e-blast to members in preparation for this AGM, but can be found at CAEP's website. If we can show the appropriate slide. So I'm pleased to say that the audit of CAEP's 2024 financials was another clean audit. There were no significant findings related to fraud risk or internal controls, and no matters to report for the other financial reporting categories. AI technology was used by KPMG during the 2024 audit, which shows 100% of the expenses to be tested. There was a recorded surplus of $162,367 for 2024. However, after the initial 2024 budget was approved with a forecasted surplus then of $118,000, the CAEP board authorized the expenditure of up to $150,000 in order to convene the in-person meeting on the EM Power Report. The funding for this forum was to come from operational fund. However, given the strength of CAEP's financial situation through 2024, the executive director did not transfer the funds as they weren't needed. The forum expenses total slightly more than $112,000, so the true surplus would have been $274,000 had the funds been transferred from the operational fund. The statement of operations, which you can see in front of you there, highlights that all revenue categories except for publishing were higher in 2024 than 2023. The major reason for the drop in publishing revenue was a decline in the ad revenue of approximately $54,000. Overall, expenses were only up slightly, and the resulting net revenue was higher in 2024 than in 2023. You can see that there. The statement of changes in assets and net assets shows some technical restructuring that's being done as recommended by our accountants and supported by our auditors. Formerly, the old version on the balance sheet had the operational fund as part of the internally restricted fund. In this new clarification, the operational fund will no longer be part of the restricted fund, and its use is being clarified to reflect that the operational fund is an unrestricted fund that is used to fund current operations, programs, and strategic initiatives. Another technical amendment was the agreement that at the end of each year, the interest earned from the Research Endowment Fund will be transferred to the EMAF Grant Fund. This is a common practice with endowment funds, as it's a type of investment fund where the principal amount, the initial donation amount, remains intact, while the income generated from the investment is used to support a specific charity or nonprofit organization. The main purpose is to provide long-term financial support to the organization by ensuring a steady stream of income from investment in returns. This will ensure that the EMAF is well funded. When reviewing the statement of cash flows, the cash flows were strong in 2024 and improved over that of 2023. The controls on accounts receivable were tightened, and the outstanding accounts receivable were reduced. Prepaid expenses and deferred revenue were higher in 2024, but most of that was related to the 2025 conference. As I highlighted earlier, the cash at the end of the year was high, over $450,000. So there's no need to move any funds from the operational fund. I'll throw it out to the membership if there's any questions. And I did the PLI session on meetings, and you're supposed to wait 8 seconds. I think I've waited the 8 seconds. And so hearing no questions, I'll now ask upon Paul Pajot, the chair of the CAEP Committee on Audit and Finance, to present the financial motions, but I don't think we have quorum, right? So
Sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
Sunil, we don't yet have quorum, so I think we will have to defer that item and we'll move back a little bit in the agenda and I will give some updates about the elections and then I'll give an update. So for anyone that's joined in the last few minutes, we are waiting for quorum, which will be somewhere around 55 participants in the meeting. So that's kind of why you're seeing the agenda items all out of sync, and we have not yet been able to approve the agenda or the minutes. So we will get back to all of those formal votes when we have quorum. But in the interim, we're continuing on with items that we can discuss. So this year, regarding the election, the 2 vacant board of director positions were re-elected by acclamation for a 2-year term from 2025 to 2027. Given that there were no additional nominations submitted by the members in response to CAEP call for nominations, we have James Stempian has been reappointed as director in the Prairie region, and Constance LeBlanc has been reappointed as director for the East region. For the nominating committee, there were 3 members who were also re-elected by acclamation. They were David Messenger, Sophie Goslin, and Chow Pham. All right. So now I will provide my annual review. It's a privilege to provide this update on CAEP's work over the past year. Canadian emergency medicine continues to face extraordinary pressures. Our system remains under severe strain, stretching the limits of what emergency departments, providers, and patients can bear. Yet even in the face of these challenges, we've continued to move forward, not simply identifying the problems, but actively driving solutions. One of the most significant steps this year was the work following the release of the eMpower report. Over the past year, eMpower has become far more than just a document. Through ongoing engagement with policymakers and health system partners, CAEP has positioned itself at the center of national discussions on how to stabilize and rebuild emergency care. These conversations have shifted from debate to action. We've also seen important growth in national research capacity. The formal launch of the Canadian Emergency Department Research Network, or CEDRN, has strengthened emergency medicine's ability to generate evidence, evaluate change, and inform policy. In a system where reform demands both urgency and data, CEDRN's Pan-Canadian Research Network is helping to move emergency medicine forward as a learning health system. At the same time, we've continued to address key workforce priorities, including national position statements on pregnancy and parental leave, support for advanced career physicians, and safe virtual care integration. Early work is also underway on a national workforce survey designed to provide insight into the current landscape and to guide future workforce planning. I also want to acknowledge the increasingly diverse and active Public Affairs Committee, who have helped ensure that CAEP remains a strong public presence in the media, in advocacy, and public awareness. Our commitments to equity, diversity, and inclusion continue to deepen, reflected in board leadership, committee work, and organizational policy. We remain committed to leading with principle and courage, and to building a more inclusive and representative emergency medicine community. This year, Canadian emergency medicine also took a major role internationally, as we welcomed colleagues from around the world to Canada for the International Conference on Emergency Medicine, or ICEM. ICEM brought together clinicians, educators, researchers, and leaders from across the globe. It was not only a chance to showcase Canadian emergency medicine, but also to share solutions and confront common challenges together. While our systems may differ, we remain united by a common mission: to deliver timely, compassionate, and effective care to patients in need, wherever and whoever they may be. And related to ISEM, as we have not yet approved the agenda, we did want to alert the attendees that we have, in response to member feedback, we added an agenda item regarding ISEM, and that will be an opportunity later on in the meeting. So we hope to have some fruitful discussions there. Above all, I want to thank you, the members of CAEP. Your resilience, your skill, and your unwavering commitment to caring for patients is the anchor of this profession through extraordinary times. Thank you for the work that you do, for being part of this amazing community. I'm deeply grateful to the CAEP board, to our exceptional head office team, and to Lynn Garrow for her steady leadership and tireless work. Together, we're advancing meaningful change for our patients, for our profession, and for our system. Now let's take a moment here and see if I think we still don't have quorum. So I think we'll hold on one moment. We'll just check what else we're able to cover here. So I think the only item that I have on the agenda that's not going to require some decisions now would be ISAM. So we want to take some time now to address concerns raised by members regarding the events of ISAM 2025. As many of you know, CAEP served as the host society for ISAM 2025 in Montreal. While overall feedback was positive, significant concerns were raised about political viewpoints surrounding two presentations. The first presentation was in the disaster medicine track, titled Response to a Multi-Site Mass Casualty, Lessons from October 7th, delivered by Dr. Daniel Kolek. The second was a plenary titled Ushering in a New Era of Mass Casualty Incident Response, Threats and Challenges of Modern Warfare, delivered by Dr. Eveline Hiddy. CAEP received negative feedback about both sessions, but the nature of the feedback was different for both. I would like to take a moment to clearly distinguish the two. Regarding the presentation about October 7th, the concern was primarily around the selection of the topic, with the title reflecting a specific conflict on October 7th, and that it presented only the perspective of, only one perspective, with the speaker being from Israel. The content of the presentation was more general. It focused on emergency preparedness techniques that could be applied in any setting. To be clear, the concerns we received were numerous, but they were predominantly in advance of the presentation, and the actual presentation was well received. Dr. Kolek did take great care to ensure his content was focused on education and not political content. For the plenary, some concerns were brought forward prior to her session regarding her past social media activity. The planning committee spoke directly with her, reviewed the speaker protocol, and had been reassured that she would remain professional and educationally focused without political content. Unfortunately, we've received several concerns that her content veered into political viewpoints, straying from the speaker guidelines. Concerns were also raised regarding moderation and that opposing voices were not heard. These events at ISEM generated strong emotional responses in attendees, which in turn gave rise to additional expressions of political viewpoint through protests, audience comments, social media, and the ISEM chat. CAEP did not oversee the conference program, as ISEM is governed by the International Federation for Emergency Medicine, or IFEM, and key decisions were made by the IFEM board. The local planning committee and IFEM oversight committee released an initial statement regarding the events during the final day of the conference. It's available on the CAEP website and the meeting materials. In the days following the conference, the CAEP board moved quickly to understand what happened, to gather input, and determine the next steps. The board convened an emergency meeting to be briefed by the local planning committee, and we reviewed impact statements from members, evaluation data, social media, and other feedback. On June 9th, CAEP issued a formal statement reaffirming our core values: neutrality, inclusivity, opposition to all forms of hate and discrimination, and the importance of maintaining a scientific forum free from political bias. It acknowledged the impact of these events on many members and affirmed that concerns have been heard. Unfortunately, we have received feedback that this statement was misinterpreted and suggested equivalency between the two talks and the speakers. I'm sorry for that. Our intentions were to encompass the many ways in which political views surrounded the two presentations, but in doing so, we caused some confusion. While CAEP did not oversee the program, we do hold responsibility as the host society to reflect on what happened and how we can improve our own processes so this does not happen again. Looking forward, CAEP will review internal processes for speaker selection, presentation review, and moderation expectations. A speaker policy had been developed by the local organizing committee in advance of ISEM, and we will review this policy and determine if it needs to be strengthened or supported by other actions. We will consult with relevant partners and communities to identify best practices. For example, we've received an invitation from the Canadian Federation of Jewish Medical Associations, and we intend to meet with them soon. We commit to providing updates to members by the end of the summer, well in advance of CAEP 2026, which will be held in Winnipeg. We recognize that the speaker's platform at a conference is a privilege, and it comes with obligations to uphold our ethical standards and educational standards. We recognize that these events had personal and emotional impact on many members. Today, at this discussion, we want to hear from members, and we also want to focus on constructive steps on how CAEP can learn and adapt and find ways to uphold the compassion, professionalism, and inclusivity that define this community. We are now going to invite members to speak, and if you want to speak or offer your thoughts, we welcome a time to do that now. You're also welcome to follow up after the AGM with the board through email. I'd like you to use the Zoom function, the raise hand function, and I will invite speakers in order. To ensure that as many voices are heard as possible, we ask that you try to keep your remarks under 3 minutes and focus on specific requests or recommendations. We're going to compile this input, and it will be discussed further at the CAEP board meeting tomorrow. If you have specific questions that I don't have all the answers for, the board will seek the answers, and we will send more details to the attendees after the AGM. Lastly, I'd like to ensure that we're all communicating in a way that's respectful and considerate of others' viewpoints. We will not tolerate hate speech, discrimination, or yelling. If this occurs, the speaker will be muted, offered a chance to regroup, and then may continue. If the behavior continues, we will move on to the next speaker. Okay. So again, please do the raise hand function, and Lisa, you are first. So I'll let you unmute there.
Hi, thank you, Amy. Hi, everyone. Many of you know me. My name's Lisa Solomon, and I'm speaking today both as a CAEP member and someone who's at ISEM, and in addition, in my role as member of the executive committee of the Canadian Federation of the Jewish Medical Association, otherwise known as CFJMA. The CFJMA includes the Jewish Medical Association of British Columbia, the Jewish Healthcare Association of Alberta, the Jewish Physicians Association of Manitoba, the Jewish Medical Association of Ontario, l'Association des Médecins Juifs de Québec, and the Jewish Physicians Group of the Atlantic Jewish Council. Together, we officially represent well over 2,000 physicians across Canada. What happened at ISEM 2025 caused significant psychological and emotional harm to a large number of Jewish people in the emergency medicine community and in the broader Jewish healthcare community, many whom have reached out to CFJMA and its member associations for advice and support. It also deeply alarmed a number of non-Jewish allies, and it was all preventable. One of our Jewish colleagues who presented in a highly professional manner on a clinical topic was harassed and protested prior to and during his session because of his ties to Israel. And to clarify, he's actually not from Israel. He was born in Canada. The idea that attendees wearing conference badges could hold up protest signs personally targeting him, and that they were then permitted to remain at the conference as if nothing had happened, was profoundly shocking to many Jewish and non-Jewish alike. Concerns about Dr. Hitti's plenary were flagged to the organizing committee months in advance, yet what ultimately took place, a plenary filled with unchecked, one-sided political contact, left many Jewish attendees feeling unsafe, unseen, and unwelcome. We've heard the explanation that she was advised not to speak about geopolitics, but nobody stopped her when she did. Nobody intervened, nobody cut the mic, except when one distressed Jewish physician tried to respond calmly and respectfully. In the end, after 2 days of open, angry anti-Semitism, the only person silenced was the Jew who asked for accountability. On behalf of the CFJMA, I wrote a letter to the CAEP leadership and the conference organizing committee articulating the magnitude of harm caused, informed by the dozens of messages, emails, and phone calls I received during and after the conference. Our letter also shared deeply personal reflections on how this experience struck at the core of many of our members' identities, their ethnicity, their sense of safety, and for some, their nationality. While CAPE's official response was measured in tone, it lacked both recognition of the specific harm done to one particular community and any real accountability for that harm. What we did not hear was, we made a mistake, we're sorry. Instead, we've been told that a standing ovation for Dr. Hitti, whose remarks included misinformation, anti-Semitic tropes, and statements that inflamed tensions during a time of record high anti-Semitism in Canada, somehow validated her talk. But in truth, it only demonstrated that a significant number of attendees were willing to applaud anti-Semitism in a professional setting. That perhaps is the most frightening part of all. And while CAPE anticipated controversy, the plan that was put in place focused on suppressing dissent rather than preventing harm. But that failure has broken trust. Today, we're holding CAPE leadership accountable. I've just heard, I think that you are willing to accept that accountability, and I appreciate that. And it's a call for self-reflection, for honesty, and a real commitment to do better. I'm happy to say that that we have engaged with CAPE, and the CFJMA is ready and willing to help CAPE rebuild trust, not just with our members, but with the many allies who stood with us in the days that followed. We hope CAPE will meet us at the crossroads, acknowledge that mistakes were made, and begin working us to move forward together. And as the saying goes, nothing about us without us. Let me close with a request to every CAPE member here today. Please take a moment to put yourself in the shoes of those who've been impacted by these events. Then imagine you're a leader in your field, hearing that your colleagues, your peers have experienced something deeply harmful. Would you dismiss it, or would you act with courage, clarity, and care? And we're asking you to lead. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lisa. And we very much want to move forward with you on this and very much appreciate your association's offer to do so. So we will be in touch very soon. Thank you. There is someone in the chat who has their hand raised. It's Alicia Targonsky. So I will try to find you. I'm going to have to unmute you. So give me one moment to find you. Oh, there we go. Okay, now I can find you there. Just press the unmute. There you go.
Okay, you were probably looking for a woman, so there you go. You found me. So first of all, I want to thank CAPE for addressing this issue. I want to say hi to everybody who I recognize in the chat there. It's nice to see some familiar faces. And Amy, I do appreciate your comments right before this discussion, and Lisa as well. I don't know if I can speak to the same effectiveness as Lisa did, because she pretty much summarized everything that I wanted to say, but I will try my best. And I'll start off by saying I'm a proud CAPE member. I've been a CAPE member since I've been practicing emergency medicine for the past 12 years. So what happened at ISOM was quite hurtful, and I felt a bit ashamed and embarrassed, not just for myself, but for CAPE in general. And I will say up front that I'm Jewish, proudly Jewish. I've been wearing a Star of David since basically the beginning of the last 2 years of horrible experiences most Jewish doctors have had. So, like many physicians, I watched the recording of Dr. Hittie's talk and Dr. Kolek's seminar, and I saw photos of the protesters who were given permission to demonstrate, albeit limited permission, but they were tolerated more than they should have been at the conference. And to say I'm deeply disappointed would be an understatement. If it was known in advance that Dr. Hittie's slides were politically motivated, then it's only logical that her talk would have reflected those same views. And I think it was as obvious as you can imagine it would be reviewing her social media in advance. Asking her to change the slides didn't actually change the underlying intent. At that point, she had already failed to comply with the speaker policy, which I'm happy to read out loud, but I think everybody has it. And I reviewed it again last night, and she did multiple violations of that. When her talk actually veered into political and anti-Israel territory, nothing was done. This is especially frustrating given that you had a plan to cut off audience members who challenged their points. I understand that a plan was made in advance in case anything was controversial afterwards. I think the same should have been applied to the speaker. Protesters who were also allowed to stand holding signs that included blood libels against a Jewish physician, a Jewish Canadian physician, and CAPE member. That is inexcusable, and I haven't seen a public apology for allowing that to happen. There were meetings to plan for audience questions, yet somehow no plan to stop protesters spreading inflammatory anti-Semitic messages at the same venue. After receiving many letters from concerned physicians, including some from abroad, CAPE's response was mostly filled with excuses. One of those excuses was that Dr. Hittie received a standing ovation. That's not a justification, that's gaslighting. A standing ovation can be a social cue, not a reflection of broad agreement. People often stand up simply because others are doing so. The correct response to everything that transpired at ISEM would have been simple. We made a mistake. And I appreciate the comments from today. We allowed a political talk to go forward without safeguards. We enforced a double standard, one that silenced dissent while giving a platform to inflammatory rhetoric. In CAPE's response letter, anti-Semitism was paired with Islamophobia, and I know that's a common thing, but I don't think there was anything Islamophobic about Daniel Kolek's talk. But you could argue that the opposite is true for Dr. Hittie's talk. Kolek's seminar, which had no political content, was nevertheless categorized as controversial, and that's baffling and inappropriate. Why was his neutral academic talk lumped in with one that included overt political messaging? Was it because anti-Semitic people were displeased? This form of hatred towards Jewish people should not be appeased. As a member of an organizing committee of another large Canadian emergency medicine conference, I can say this without hesitation. If this had happened under our leadership, we would have taken full responsibility and we would have acknowledged the mistake, given our attendees a clear assurance that it would never happen again. So I will just echo what Lisa said, and I think we need to have some kind of assurance that this will not happen again. There should be some formal policy that should be undertaken by CAPE that this will be avoided and there will be consequences if something like this were to happen. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you, and we'll definitely take those recommendations in our discussion tomorrow. I did want to briefly discuss, the statement about Islamophobia and anti-Semitism in the same sentence. And, as I'm understanding more and more about the context, I can see how that was very much misperceived, and it appeared, we're potentially calling the October 7th talk Islamophobia. Certainly that was not at all the intention or the meaning. The reason we pulled that quote out was that was in our statement from October 2023. And unrelated to ISEM, and we wanted to make sure that our views as CAPE were clear. So it maybe should have been more distinct that it wasn't commenting on ISEM, but this is where CAPE stands with respect to hate and discrimination. So I regret that was misinterpreted, so I apologize for that. Vired, you'll be next. Let me just allow you to unmute.
Okay. I don't have a camera, sorry. I will do my best to stay calm, although this is extremely difficult for me. I feel that a lot of the members, including CAPE leadership, do not or still do not understand that what actually happened with this Dr. Hitty's lecture, that was practically hate speech, because the misinformation was not like not being correct about numbers and stuff. She basically went one blood libel after the other and blamed Israel and by association the Jewish people on war crimes that did not happen or did not happen by the Jewish community. In fact, it did happen by terrorist organizations that are still considered terrorist organizations in Canada. And by doing so, she misled the entire crowd that listened to her and may not be as familiar with the history and who did what and when. And the conclusion, even if you look at the blog that was written by CAPE member, I don't remember who it was, but when he recapped the day, the simple example was that he put his initial draft, or like what was already published, was that Israel basically targeted hospital pagers, which is a complete blood label. And if that person understood that, it's fair to assume everybody else did the same. So by putting all this misinformation that is basically, if you put it all together, demonize the whole community, then the next step is dehumanize them. And the next step is not just psychological safety, but actually physical safety. And in the same week, we had people like Jewish people being killed for just being plain Jewish. And the fact that Daniel Kolek raised with so much antagonism is first because he's Jewish. Second, October 7 did happen. And if we want to take that off the title of his talk, we might as well deny the Holocaust altogether. Because if we cannot speak in a professional manner on events that did happen without lying, then what are we doing here? And so my biggest concern is that there is still no taking responsibility for the misinformation that was spread. And basically by that, it's considered in my eyes and many other people's as hate speech. And no such notification was sent out to the CAPE or the people who attended the conference. They are still under the impression that CAPE is a valid scientific meeting, and if the content was presented there, then it must be true. And by not denying that, we and you are actually giving your stamp of approval for blood label, and the next person's lives will be on our hands. That's really my biggest concern. And to be honest, I got home and the first person I spoke to who attended the conference told me, Israel bloody lies. That was their conclusion from the talk. Someone who I considered as a respectful colleague until then. So the harm has occurred. It's not a potential harm. It has occurred and it's spreading. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Vired. I think Erin is next. Erin Orkin.
Thank you for giving me a chance to speak. Hi, everyone. I'm Aaron Orkin. I know many of you, and those of you who I don't know, I'm honored to be your colleague and honored to be a part of CAPE. I want to first say that I agree with all of the points that have been raised by the other speakers, so I won't reiterate just how painful and harmful it was for me to review the footage and materials that I could access about these talks and about the surrounding events, although I wasn't able to attend myself. Although I'll say that given how painful watching those that media was, it might have been the best conference non-attendance decision I've ever made. I want instead to acknowledge that I see how painful it is for CAPE leadership. I see how painful it is for Dr. Kernick for you to read this statement. It doesn't go unnoticed that this is hard. And rather than assigning additional blame and pain to an amount of pain that I see that is real and that is a genuine challenge, what I want to acknowledge is that the reality of politics in the world today, and I don't mean just geopolitics globally, I mean the politics of medicine, the politics of our profession right now make leadership extremely hard. I think we all know from our clinical practices where we see patients in the middle of the night in emergency departments yelling at one another and the need for security. And we think about our professional environment where we want that experience to be as different as possible, as it possibly can, to providing care in a loud or angry or security ridden emergency department in the middle of the night. We need to acknowledge that the only line between the professional world we want to inhabit and the genuine violence that we are seeing orchestrated towards Jewish communities in North America, which is on orders of magnitude higher than it appears in any other community. The only line of defense against that are codes of conduct that are enforced and civility. That makes leadership hard. It means that leaders who may once have risen to those roles because they saw opportunities for comfortable, really quite fun career advancement now have jobs that are relentlessly difficult and that force them to make decisions that are always polarizing. And so what I want to bring to the notes that you're preparing, Dr. Kernick, and the reflection that the CAPE board is going to have to make around this is to really explore, educate, and internalize how are we going to enforce our codes of conduct? What are the characteristics of effective leadership in the political context that we see? Because that was not the last conference where these sorts of issues will arise. And what sort of officers do we need within our board or in conference leadership so that those codes of conduct can be enforced? If a general board member who is appointed on a brief term doesn't naturally have the skills to enforce a code of conduct, CAPE may need to appoint a code of conduct officer whose job it is to enforce our code of conduct and protect our general board members from the controversies that can happen around this. But an organization that simply cedes the space and says we're going to have nobody managing the coop is going to have foxes in the coop all the time. And we are going to move very quickly from controversy to violence, which is already taking shape in North America, is already on our shores, is already active, and will soon enter our profession if we don't have people willing to enforce a code of conduct. Simply saying we want to be nice isn't enough. We actually need to enforce it. And then the only other point I really wanted to make is that we've heard a lot about blood libel. We've heard a lot about other forms of anti-Semitic tropes, but a pervasive and common anti-Semitic trope is the belief that Jews are fundamentally dangerous, difficult, or need counter-pressure when they organize and vote and voice their opinions. That somehow when Jews are organized as a people, that's a threat to our communities, that's a threat to our organizations, and there's a need to sort of push back. That is a common perception of Jews. It's a pervasive form of anti-Semitism. And I believe that it played into a certain extent to the response that I've seen here to say, not only do we know that there's something wrong, but we got to watch out because those Jews are making their opinions known. And I just want to remind folks that engaging with Jews as though they are dangerous when they are organized and dangerous when they state their opinions is itself a form of anti-Semitism. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Aaron, and I really appreciate some of the recommendations that you gave us that we will certainly take to the board. Specifically things around looking at the code of conducts, and that's what we're kind of looking for recommendations on here is what was lacking in our preparation that allowed this to happen. I also liked the point you made about how medicine is political, and this is, of course, a very sensitive and important topic related to these two presentations. Medicine is political in so many ways, whether it's about climate change, whether it's about harm reduction strategies, unwanted pregnancies. We can run into issues of political nature in many different talks. And so we do want to make sure that we're looking at all of the protocols to make sure that, attendees at future conferences don't experience harm. Sorry, I've been having a lot of emotion, of course, as you may be seeing, and this is reflected in all of the impact statements that we've been receiving. So I do want to acknowledge that we see what's happened, we take it seriously, and we're wanting to do better. I also wanted to just comment on what you said about feeling like the response that we gave as a CAPE statement was impacted by thoughts of Jewish people being threatening in large numbers. That certainly was not impacted. I don't know how to prove that to you, but really the way that the statement came out, which I know I can see how it was misperceived, but the way the statement came out in trying to be balanced was us seeing that we actually did get impact statements from people having concerns about the October 7th talk prior to its delivery. So, multiple concerns about feeling unsafe that we were creating that sort of a one-sided environment. So this was not directed at Daniel Cullick. This was directed at organizing and how it was framed. So we wanted to make sure that we weren't alienating a group of members that also felt harm. It's hard to kind of qualify one over another, but that doesn't negate the specific harms that happened at the plenary. So sorry for that misrepresentation, but it did not come from us trying to being fearful of organized Jewish members. I hope that makes sense. Okay. So thank you very much. I'm going to move on to the next speaker, which is Daniel Cullick.
Hi, folks. My name has been bandied about a bit. So I figure I should at least say something. I've been with CAPE for my entire career. And when after almost 40 years, a smear campaign came out this conference, I realized I'd graduated from emergency physician to Islamophobe and racist and goodness and bomber and whatever. I want to say right up front, the support I got from CAPE and from the CAPE leadership was significant, and I really felt cared for. So we need to, that side has to be said. All these complaints ahead of time were aimed at me. They weren't aimed at the content. They were aimed at me. Why? Because they didn't want to view as full disclosure, because I'm going to be talking about something that happened in Israel. I wanted full disclosure. As I said, in my past, I was in the Israeli Armed Forces, absolutely. Nobody bothered to check that was 40 years ago, but doesn't matter. When that happened, I got a ton of support. CAPE has been my family for many years. They care for me and I care for them. I want that right up front. I also know that people don't ever walk in intending to be racist or intending, of course not. That is not the point. Hate spreads insidiously. People don't walk up and say, kill the Jews, of course not. And they don't say, or any other ethnic group. Let's even take it aside from being a Jewish issue. But slowly but surely, comments that you're not really aware of, there's this little creep, this mission creep of a little thing here and a little thing there, and maybe it's okay to say this, and maybe it's okay to say that. And we see that happening south of the border. Look at the hate speech coming out in the States, because every little step makes things worse. This is not about politics. This is about hate speech. And if Dr. Hitti had made a comment about, as opposed to being about Israel, about LGBTQ, about Native population, what any other group, about the Ukraine-Russia conflict, taking a side with Russia or whatever, we wouldn't be having some of these discussions, because immediately we would have said, this is inappropriate. But somehow here, it got through. And it's worrisome because there was enough warning ahead of time. But putting all that aside, I recognize that CAEP was blindsided by some of this. CAEP was blindsided because we didn't expect, you don't expect protesters to stand up with signs at a medical conference making all kinds of accusations. You don't expect speakers to lie about what they're going to present. We as Canadians, we as decent folks expect decent behavior from others. And when it doesn't happen, we're blindsided. And that is part of why I think some of this response from CAEP has been maybe stuttering. It didn't work out the way CAEP intended to. So all that I think is true. And I think we need to recognize that and not get all hung up about, we certainly could get hung up about who did what, but that's not productive. I want to start looking forward for a second. We do need some kind of a policy, and we need to be able to apply that in real terms. The fact that I gather from Eddie that they knew ahead of time there's a problem, the slides were edited ahead of time, and they had put together a plan in place for Dr. Hitty because they knew she was going to, or she may have caused problems, but it wasn't enforced, is a problem. I think CAEP should basically say that if you're going to be a speaker, that speaker's podium is not a privilege, not a right, it's a privilege, and it comes with obligations. One of those obligations is you have to deliver content that matches the stated topic and that matches your learning objectives. And if the speaker uses the platform to deviate from that, then they may be stopped by the moderator. That has to be cleared up front. Certainly, if the speaker uses the platform to deliver political content, they will be stopped. And people can always question, is it political, is it appropriate? Simple litmus test. Is the content applicable outside of that political context? In other words, the talk that I delivered, could you apply it in any Arab country, in any country hostile to Israel? Of course you can, because the content was medical. It was categorically 100% medical, and I will stand behind that 1,000%, and I will deliver it again to anybody who's questioning it. If you deviate from that, you should be shut down, and that has to be clear ahead of time. And if a person uses the platform to deliver hate speech, and I know, hard to define, but we need to at least say this, then they should be stopped. And any speaker who is stopped should never be allowed to speak again until they acknowledge their behavior and commit to not doing it again. We have to do it, but we have to enforce it. Because if we don't enforce it, this is all, it's just airy-fairy nonsense. And I think that if we do agree to some kind of guidelines like that, we should enforce them retrospectively to this immediate conference and to Dr. Hitty's talk and to mine. If you feel I was inappropriate, by all means, come at me, criticize me. But it should be applied to everyone who was at this recent conference that has sparked this problem. And then none of the speakers who are found to be offensive should ever be invited back to a CAEP event until they apologize and acknowledge their behavior. And I think I'm probably well over my 3 minutes time, so I'm going to stop now. Thanks for your tolerating me.
Thank you, Daniel. And what I hear you saying, I think there's a few different policies you're describing there. So one is kind of the planning piece, but also moderation guidelines and active kind of enforcement of speaker guidelines. But then when you say retrospectively, I think you're also referring to a consequence from a speaker not following the guidelines.
Precisely. It's
kind of
happened.
including-
We need to make it clear that, and if we don't do something about it now, this is the mission creep I'm talking about. You let one thing happen, then another thing happens. We will find ourselves, had this been dealt with at the conference briefly and right away, we wouldn't be having this meeting today, right? The longer we wait, the longer we let it sit, we get deeper and deeper in this hole of hate speech. And it's not political. It could have been on any other political topic. It is not an Israel-Gaza issue. It is a hate speech issue. And once we take ourselves out of the politics, suddenly things are a lot clearer. It's not about politics.
Thank you. And yes, with you were very right to notice that we were kind of blindsided. This came out of everyone had hoped that there would be professionalism and that we wouldn't be in this situation. So that's kind of where maybe what feels like delay, and certainly is delay in kind of us trying to kind of catch our breath and figure out, identify what happened and get informed. It's been a process. So, I wish we could have been more immediately responsive, but that's the reason for the delay. So thank you for noticing that. And thank you for your comments, Daniel. I think we'll move on in the interest of time. We'll go to Jennifer. I'll have you unmute.
Hello. The previous speakers have already stated much of what I wanted to say. I'll actually see if I can put my video on for a moment. I'm in my car. There we go. So I won't repeat their outstanding points. Maybe just a personal note on how important it is to get this right. Many of us have experienced directly the consequences of anti-Semitism, both in our personal lives and sadly in our workplaces. I came to the Jewish community not by birth, but through marriage. And I will say, and that marriage was over 20 years ago. And it wasn't until the past 5 years that I really recognized that being Jewish threatens the safety of my children. I didn't realize that when I proudly gave them very recognizably Jewish names that I put targets on their backs. And it is so critically important that CAEP gets this right because our safe spaces are closing. I'm very aware when I go to work that some of the students, some of the residents put things on social media that threaten my family. I'm aware that some of my patients have done the same. I don't know who they are. So my ability to trust in general has been greatly lowered over the past couple of years. And I had thought that CAEP was a safe space because I've been a member of CAEP for quite a long time. And I understand that CAEP was blindsided and that what happened was the last thing that anyone wanted to happen. It is just so important to get this right because not only do I want CAEP to get this right, but for me to be able to continue my work as an emergency physician, I need safe spaces. And sadly for me, I think the most harmful thing that happened was the standing ovation because I need my colleagues to be people whom I can trust. And knowing that my colleagues were in the audience, and I didn't specifically note if my colleagues were part of the standing ovation, but if they weren't, many like them were. And that image is like a scar that I can't get out of my brain. And so for me to be able to continue working as an emergency physician and feel safe and not just decide it's time to retire early, I really need CAEP to really commit to doing better. And I think that that is what I'm seeing. I do have some very specific suggestions. I put just a small comment in the box that I think it's too much pressure on the moderator and honestly unsafe for the moderator. This session had a Jewish moderator. If the moderator had shut down the session, I can only imagine the backlash and perhaps danger to his physical safety that could have happened. So I don't think it should be just the moderator who can do that. I also think slides need to be reviewed well in advance, maybe by more than one person, so that political bias can be detected, or what someone thinks is going to be okay, maybe someone else recognizes as problematic. So I have these specific suggestions and I will put them in writing. But I wanted to tell my personal story because it is just so critically important to me that CAEP gets this right. And I mean, I can see that you care, and I really appreciate that. And that alone really means a lot to me because the messaging I had heard so far had felt fairly general and anonymous. And so knowing that it affects you personally, and my voice is quavering a little bit, I appreciate you've been a bit emotional as well. This is hard for all of us. We didn't want to be in this situation. We never thought that we would. But I really appreciate that I'm hearing that there's willingness to figure out how we can go forward without something like this happening again.
Thank you so much, specifically for the suggestions that I know you'll be able to give us. And we do want that kind of very specific plan if you have ideas on how we can prevent this from happening. And I do just want to reiterate that CAPE wants to get this right. And, you know, because we want this to be a safe space for all of our members and, you know, specifically for the Jewish community that has felt, you know, significantly harmed from this event. So we will be meeting with the Jewish Medical Association and with yourself. So hopefully we can continue to work towards that and make sure that all of you as Jewish CAPE members feel that this is a safe space and can lift you up in the profession. Thank you, Jennifer. George.
Thank you. I've got a foggy screen. I'll try to clean up there. For anybody who knows me, it's difficult for me to do anything under 3 minutes. But Amy, I want to acknowledge again the emotion that you've carried through this, and it's very clear that this has deeply impacted you, and that's important for all of us. I actually, this is the first time I'm hearing of this. I attended this meeting without any knowledge of the controversy around this. I'm going to give you a little bit of context that very few of you know, but um, uh, you know, my mother was liberated from Auschwitz, and my father was liberated from Mauthausen. And on the day my namesake George, he was liberated also from Mauthausen. And we found out about 15 years ago that on that liberation day, as he stayed behind with somebody with typhus in one of the bunks, um, he opened the door on the day of freedom and was shot. I have no family. Um, from a grandparent's point of view, our family came here with nothing and built a life here. I've got two grandkids, and um, on October 7th, one of my kids says, you know, what can we do? And I said, the best thing we can do is just be good people that happen to be Jews. And it's been very, very, very difficult over time. And I have a issue with the bandwagon, I will say, of EDI and where it's lost our group within this. And I feel as if it is. We speak about it, we dedicate an immense amount of time to it, and I understand that. But for example, terminology is I am a structural white supremacist by the language that's acknowledged within this. So we have to be, you know, I think um, uh, be be careful that when we say this, that we mean it, and I think that that's what people are speaking to, and that inclusivity we've heard from others. And the only thing I'm going to say in close is that I think what an incredible summary of this came out in the New York Times, and I read to the left, I read to the right, I read to the center to get a broad perspective. But this was the last week's piece, which I sent to the deans here. Anti-Semitism is an urgent problem. Too many people are making excuses, and it talks about these issues contextually and uses the denominators in terms of other marginalized groups and look at the amount of hate crimes proportionately. And the Jews and anti-Semitism is grossly overrepresented compared to the other marginalized groups that are around. And we just need to keep that uh, front and center and try to understand. If I was in that room when that group had stood and applauded, I don't know what I would have done, right? But I'm glad that I wasn't. I'm glad that I wasn't there, and I say every day that in many ways I'm glad that my parents aren't alive to see what we're experiencing. So that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to move to Alex Twachinov.
Hi, Amy. Hi, everybody. Wow, this is such an important discussion. I want to thank you, Amy, and of course, by extension, the board for giving the time for us to talk about all this. It's hugely important. These issues are very complex. I don't believe that most people understand this, whose families aren't directly connected to it. I've spent a lot of time over the last year trying to educate my friends and colleagues. It's tough. A year ago in Manitoba, the valedictory speech that was given disrupted the entire graduation proceedings, leaving scars on the Jewish students and faculty that are still healing. None of the dozens of people on the podium intervened. It's very hard to intervene in these situations. We're not used to having to stand up and stop our colleagues. We have this pervasive sense of respect that sometimes prevents us from doing what we have to do. I'm gonna, I love Daniel Kolek and agree with most of what he has to say. But when he said that this wasn't a Jewish issue, it was a hate issue, I take issue with it a little bit. I think something that we have to be very clear about is that there are organized forces in our country and all around the world who have an organized, systematized mission to discredit speakers with any affiliation to Israel. And that's what happened. This wasn't spontaneous. This was systematic. I know people made their very best efforts to stop us, but nobody's mentioned this. Even the last talk by Courtney Howard on environmental aspects of emergency medicine was polluted by a question about wars and environmental contamination, which was a very directly political statement. And the moderator let it go. So I think it's very hard to intervene, but we must. I think that CAEP has actually been very proactive in this. We are not the first organization that's had our conference hijacked. This is going to continue. I am going to plead along with the others who have spoken, that the board take steps to educate themselves, understand what's going on. A code of conduct is good, but actually taking action in the moment is very, very difficult. I don't have an easy answer. It's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of courage. But I applaud this discussion as a necessary first step, and I hope these discussions will continue. And I am certainly prepared to contribute whatever I can to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. I'm impressed. You probably stayed under 3 minutes. It's usually hard for you.
Very uncharacteristic.
I will just note that Trevor Jane is actually wanting to speak, but he can't put his hand up. So Fraser, we're going to go to Trevor first. Let me just find him here. Have you unmute, Trevor? There we go.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah, good. Well, good to see everybody. And I do sincerely apologize for being a little bit late. And I want to thank the CAEP leadership for their leadership in this difficult time. But if under 3 minutes, no problem. I just wanted to say a couple things. I'm not Jewish and I'm not Muslim. I have a Hindu background, and I've been targeted by a certain religious ideology just because my last name is Jain. And Jain is a Hindu name. And I've been targeted by folks that are in the medical field in emergency medicine because I'm very outspoken on social media about different things, as is my right, just as in their right. So just a couple observations, and forgive me if it's already been discussed. I went to both presentations. Both presentations are not the same. Dr. Kolek's presentation was fact-based, was measured, and spoke to medical issues with regards to what I was interested in. And it was attempted to be hijacked and turned into something else. The plenary speaker, on the other hand, was full of misinformation. There's definitely a lack of understanding of the law of armed conflict. We may not like it, you know, but I've deployed 9 times. I've registered mass graves in Bosnia. Rwanda, there was 1 million people killed. I'm well versed in seeing what a genocide is. I'm well versed in seeing what ethnic hate can do from all sides. And from my perspective, Daniel Kolek's presentation was fact-based and Dr. Hady's presentation was hate-based. There was lots of misinformation within her presentation, and not everybody stood up. My table didn't stand up, and I was absolutely disgusted with her presentation, and I hope she never gets a chance to speak again. Anyway, I just wanted to express that. I do want to work with CAEP and see how I can contribute to help things moving forward, and especially support our Jewish colleagues, which I firmly believe have been disproportionately targeted just for being Jewish. Just for being Jewish. You know, just for being Jewish. So there's lots of conflagration with these protests and stuff with somebody being Jewish that they're associated with Israel. So um, I just want to express myself and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. And I love being part of CAEP, and it's good to see some of my mentors on this call. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Trevor. Yeah, I know you had to join a little bit late, but I did try to kind of acknowledge what you said there. I was, disappointed that our statement was misinterpreted when we released the statement, that it sort of appeared to equate both of the talks. And so really just to acknowledge Daniel's talk was educational regarding mass casualty preparedness, and the talk itself was not political. So there was a bit of misinterpretation there in our statement equating the two.
Yeah, no, and I'm not. My comment had nothing to do with the statement, Amy, at all. I just want to express stuff, and I do appreciate your leadership and the toll that it's taken on you. We still got your back.
Thank you. Let me see. I don't see any other hands at the moment. Let me see the main chat. Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak? There is also opportunity to send emails later. We do really want to hear from everyone and hear your suggestions on how to move forward. Give it a minute. Unfortunately, we still don't have quorum, so we still can't do any of our vote. Oh, Jennifer, did you want to speak?
Yes, and I apologize for speaking twice. One thing that you just said that does have me a little bit concerned, and I'd like to just give some feedback, is referring to the CAEP statement as misinterpreted. And you may be correct that readers might be misinterpreting what was the intention of the writers. You're hearing from mostly the Jewish community, people connected to the Jewish community. There are a lot of people that are not at this meeting that were affected, and they've only seen those very general statements that CAEP has made. I'll just tell a brief story that after the events of what happened at the plenary, I was speaking to a trusted colleague and senior CAEP member about what had happened, and was distressed, and was letting him know that I had actually withdrawn my upcoming presentation and was immediately leaving the conference because of what happened. I was just so profoundly upset and didn't want to be among the people that had just given the speaker a standing ovation, and so I chose to leave. As I was telling this to my colleague, there was a young man in the vicinity. It was right before one of the poster sessions, and the area was pretty empty, but he was nearby looking at a poster. He appeared to be in his mid-20s. And I was aware that he could hear what we were saying, but that was okay with me. And so after my colleague left, this young man approached me, and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, "I was at the plenary. I knew that something was wrong, because it seemed to me like I was hearing one side, but I don't know enough about the situation to recognize what specifically was wrong about it, but it made me uncomfortable. And at the end, I saw people clap and I saw people stand, and he paused and he said, "I'm so ashamed that I clapped. I didn't stand up, but I clapped, and I feel so ashamed because I knew something was wrong, but it's just automatic. People around you are clapping, and I clapped, and now I've heard the impact that that had on you, and I just need to say that I'm sorry." And so that young man, who was so courageous and humble to come and tell me that, and it meant so much to me, but he hasn't seen that CAPE thought that anything was wrong with what happened, other than this is a contentious area and people got upset. And I think that there needs to be a distinction, of course, between Daniel's talk and the plenary, but the general CAPE membership needs to know what was wrong and what happened and what's being done so that it won't happen again, so that people like this young man can be our allies, and that they're not being misled by seeing a room full of their colleagues stand up and applaud at something that they had sensed was wrong but didn't know why.
Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that. We'll definitely take that to the board meeting tomorrow and talk about a path forward there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lisa.
I have to say I'm, been struggling the last couple of weeks since the conference, and hearing everybody's comments and support and everything. I have to say, it's been hard on all of you, and I just want to thank everyone for being so brave to speak now today, everyone, because it just means a lot. I'm getting some messages from other folks who didn't know what had happened, so thank you to all of you. Just one thing I'd like, because I realize that a whole bunch of people are asking me what happened, people weren't there. One thing that I think I really want to make clear, and just another thing is, I actually, and I've spoken to some people this, I didn't say it initially, but I rushed. We had a public affairs meeting. I was in Toronto, and another meeting. I was rushing to get there, and I actually was happy I was going to get to see Daniel's talk, which actually was about McGinn Davida Dam, which is the ambulance system. Just so everyone knows, it's like a really amazing ambulance system, and a lot of my friends have volunteered, and my kids' friends volunteer. In fact, one of my kids' friends is actually stuck in Israel right now. He was volunteering for McGinn Davida Dam, and now is trying to figure out how to get home, because obviously the flights are all, airspace is closed. So it was a really fantastic talk. But on my way in running and rushing is when I first started the protesters, and I called, thank you, Trevor. I called Trevor, and I was like, oh my God, I was like really traumatized by that. And people were obviously trying to do something, but I didn't know who else to call. And then the protester within that talk at the end was quite jarring. And then I walked into the meeting, the public affairs meeting, right after, and I was quite shaken, because this totally caught me off guard. I was not expecting this. And then I found out sitting there that they're actually the weeks prior, this wasn't just a complaining, right? This wasn't like what we did like months before to alert the organizing committee about Dr. Hiti and her social media. This was what we have experienced for the last 20 months of harassment and doxing. And in my role, and I didn't mention, I'm actually, I am the co-founder and president of the Jewish Medical Association of Ontario. We have supported like dozens and dozens of Jewish physicians, and actually non-Jewish physicians, as some of you may know, who have been doxed and harassed, either just for being Jewish or just for supporting others who are Jewish. And this is what they were doing. And I saw the Instagram account, and I will, the organization, and I don't know who else is on this, I don't want to name it, but the organization I'm putting in quotes is a hateful organization who has doxed and targeted numerous Jewish physicians. And I recognize, and I'm so sad, I even said to a few of the people who were involved, they had no idea. I recognized no one had any idea. And I kept saying, and no one knew, even though I'm involved in a committee, no one knows, obviously no one knows this other stuff that I do. And I said, I really wish that I had identified myself earlier. I trusted you know, the reply we got from the committee with all the rules and everything, it sounded reasonable. And, you know, part of me feels sort of like, I don't want to say guilty. I don't feel guilty, but I feel bad. I wish I would have identified, I wish I would have said something else. I wish I would have just accepted what was told, because that's normally not me, right? I usually would just say, well, I still don't know. Are you really sure? And then seeing that Instagram account, and it was really awful. And actually, Daniel didn't even know about the actual Instagram account, which is where the petitions and the letters were coming from. There were literally links to like send emails and all these things. And it was really awful. So these weren't just individual emails, they weren't benign, they weren't really, it was intentional and targeting Daniel specifically. And so I just want to clarify that now, knowing, because they found out after, and now seeing it, it really, just so you know, this isn't equivalent to, you now have some Jewish physicians and non-Jewish physicians who were hurt by the talk. It's not equivalent. The complaints you got before Daniel's talk was harassment. And in fact, folks who received those emails even said such right away, that they were threatened, that they were harassed, and they were concerned for their safety. And I had heard that when I was right after Daniel's talk and while I was at ISM, those were comments that I heard. So I think for folks who don't really know, or just hearing pieces and aren't really understanding, I just want to let people know at least the pieces that I know, because I don't know everything, but at least the pieces that I know what had happened before. And so I'm sorry that all of you experienced that. I really am. And like I said, we've offered, and I know we're meeting with you, but even on the side, we've dealt with this for the last 20 months. We have experience dealing with this. We want to help you. We want to help all of you who have gone through this. We want to be a partner. We want to move forward. And finally, just the last thing is, I feel, and I think this has been said by many people here today, I think one of the asks, and you know, when we meet you, we usually ask it, is really, and we can help you with this too, is really for everyone to be educated about contemporary anti-Semitism. You know, my oldest son is just finished second year university. My kids go to Jewish day school. He didn't learn contemporary anti-Semitism. He learned Holocaust and, you know, the traditional anti-Semitism. My second child just finished grade 11. His final summative task for his Jewish history course was writing an essay about contemporary anti-Semitism. So in 3 years, now the curriculum has changed for our Jewish kids in learning this. And so we are happy to help, and we will help in any way that we can. So thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, Aaron, you're next.
Thank you. I have a procedural question, and it follows from just how important I found this conversation, how helpful I found this conversation. It takes all different sorts of people and levels of engagement to make an organization like CAEP operate. There are folks who hold board positions. There are folks who come to an AGM. There are folks who come to an AGM and speak. There are others who might form a different kind of crowd and simply stand up and clap in either well-intentioned or deeply misguided ways. But the purpose of a meeting like this is to establish policy, or even just establish a record of what in the formal history of this organization happened. And we don't have quorum right now, which means that in terms of even minuting the extremely important address that you offered at the beginning of this discussion, Dr. Kernick, or documenting the thrust of this conversation as something that happened at a appropriately constituted meeting, this is like a little working group gathering together to have a chat, not a formal meeting yet. And I'm concerned about that. And so I do defer to our board and our leaders on determining how to manage that technical problem, but translating the depth and importance of this conversation into something that even amounts to a historical record is still challenging because we don't have quorum.
Yes, I can certainly understand that. We will be, so let me just double check here. With respect to kind of any decisions with the AGM, we'll be able to do kind of email votes, but I think you're more referencing this important topic and having it recorded. We will find a way to document this. We will talk about this at the board tomorrow as well to make sure that this is part of our historical record. Jennifer, how often is AGM not to have quorum? I don't know off the top of my head, but it's pretty rare to not have quorum. The last time was 2017. So we're gonna have to review the legal and formal aspects of that with the board tomorrow and identify how to rectify that. Let me just see. Erin, your hand is up still. Is that a new comment? No. Okay. Anyone else wishing to speak regarding ISEM? So since we do not have quorum, we are not able to carry on with the remainder of the meeting. There are a number of video updates, which we could show now. I think what we're going to do though, because we'll have to look at the rest of the AGM process. I think I'll direct the group to the website to review the video updates. This was a very important meeting, and I think I'd like to keep it focused on ISEM and the important discussions that we had today. I really do appreciate everyone that had the courage to speak and share your stories, and I hope that anyone that wasn't able to speak today is able to write to us and share your thoughts and especially recommendations so we can move forward as an organization and a community. CAEP really wants to get this right, and we are committed to working on it, and we have our meeting tomorrow to keep up the momentum. So I think without further ado, we can't even make a motion to adjourn. But if so I'm just keeping an eye on the chats here. If there are no further comments, I think we will end the meeting. See a thumbs up. Okay, thank you to everyone so much. This has been a very important discussion today. So we look forward to being in touch soon with some actions and more collaboration.